Hello and welcome to Reasoned UK, the Darren Grimes Show, live and exclusive. I'm delighted to make your acquaintance and have your company. Now, my friends, before we get on to today's topics and we'll chew the fat on the budget, we'll get the opinions from Grimes Grotto, from Alex Armstrong, Younes Sadaghiani and Chloe Dobbs, and they won't hold back on an economy that's gone from boom and bust to gloom and rust. But anyway, I have a question for you to start off. Why did they wait until after the Tommy Robinson rally to announce the additional charges against the alleged Southport murderer? Why did they wait until Robinson was charged, sentenced, and, in my opinion, rather cruelly and deliberately thrown into solitary in Belmarsh, rubbing shoulders with the very kind of Islamist radicals that he's been warning the British public out? Now, they may well say, oh, Grimesy, this is a mere coincidence. And I'll say, right, because announcing it when public outrage is already boiling over couldn't have possibly been a little bit inconvenient for Starmer and his stormtroopers. And then they pick the day before the budget, of course, when the headlines are primed for pounds and pence, quietly sidelining the terror charge under the radar, out of sight, out of mind. But here's what really gets me. From the moment that they branded this fella Cardiff-born, I thought, hang on a minute, something's off here. Now, I know the Welsh can be a little bit boisterous, but even the most fervent Welsh nationalist wouldn't commit such an unspeakable atrocity against a group of young girls at a holiday club, 3 beautiful young girls gone, their young lives snuffed out by unadulterated brutality. This wasn't some typical British crime. You know, you might think of knife crime, you might think of burglary, you might think of aggravated assault, whatever else. These kinds of things that we've come to expect, this wasn't it. This was an attack that feels utterly alien. It ought to feel alien. It ought to feel shocking. And it ought to be filled with a condemnation for what's happening to our country. Because this was an attack filled with hatred that has absolutely no place here in Britain. It's sort of, well, I can't possibly comment on the motives because I'll be in the clink with Tommy. But it's clear to me that the barbarian isn't at the gates anymore. The barbarian is very much here, among us, in your town, in your city, in your home. And yet somehow the authorities were absolutely certain, and quick and proud as punch, to tell us that this attack wasn't terror-related. And we've heard this before, of course. This is a common cycle of what happens now. But how very convenient. It took until Tuesday to admit that this lad, this Axel Ruda-Kumbana, had allegedly had a stash of ricin, a poison, a deeply, deeply deadly poison, and an Al-Qaeda training manual, the prescribed terrorist organisation, and a deadly weapon meant to, of course, strike at the heart of our communities. So the question that I asked yesterday was, well, Yvette Cooper, why were we kept in the dark on these details? Surely you, as Home Secretary, knew these facts. And by the way, why is it that every taxpayer-funded body seems to spring into action to bury information the moment it might actually provoke the public's rightful outrage? And no, that isn't me endorsing burning buildings on the streets of Britain. But what about those who actually spoke up about the attack in other ways, right? They were branded as far-right thugs by our own PM. They were hauled in and jailed for posting disinformation. They were jailed faster than anyone can say law and order. But maybe that surely ought to now be looked at. Could these charges be unsafe in the legal sense of the word? Was this all to deter anyone else from raising an eyebrow? And meanwhile, of course, the trial for this alleged murderer isn't until 2025. So why the delay there? Are they hoping we'll all just forget, we'll move on, and by the time it happens, we'll all have forgotten about what actually did take place? Because maybe that's the game plan. Could it be? Could it be? Am I mad here? Am I insane? And this is where the pattern gets familiar, because they obscure the identity of the accused, they criticise those who express understandable anger, deny any terror connections, and then swiftly shift the focus to the hate speech of those daring to ask the questions. They talk about disinformation online. They talk about the supposed far-right threat. And if you ask me, the far-right threat, of course, you consider how many Islamists and jihadis are on MI5's watch list. And I tell you what, it's a hell of a lot more than the bogeyman of the elusive far-right. But the establishment's response isn't about justice or accountability. They seem rather more intent to distract you with well-meaning chants of, let's not look back in anger, like after the Manchester Arena attack, those beautiful young people taken in their early years. But I think we do actually have to look back, and I think we do have a right to feel fury, because frankly, a minimum wage hike isn't enough to distract us from our white-hot rage. A penny off the price of a pint, and away you go, be grateful. That ain't enough. And come to think of it, I'll probably be condemned as racist actually for saying white hot. But maybe the British people have a right to be distressed and distraught. Because perhaps, the likes of Elsie, of BB, of Alice, maybe they deserved better than this whole charade and what Britain has become. Because today during Prime Minister's questions, Richard Tice, the Reform MP, Deputy Leader of Reform, he made a crucial intervention. He says that the government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall, had said repeatedly that more information should be released in terrorism incidents to avoid an information gap. And what did the Prime Minister have to say? Well, he was treading carefully. I mean, that's what he said. Heaven forbid the public should know the truth if it might undermine the police, the upper echelons of the police. I'm not talking about rank and file bobbies, but it is starting to look less like caution and more like a typically cretinous crawl in the opposite direction to the question.
The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall, KC, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
And in the end, my friends, this isn't just about justice for those three sweet girls. It's about every kid, every family, every person who might face harm while we're all kept in the dark from the danger. The girls, the Elsies, the BBs, the Alices, they deserved better than a government that flinches from the truth. I mean, even those girls that survived that attack, the post-traumatic stress disorder must be unimaginable. And Rhiannon Sky White, murdered, of course, over recent weeks as well, with a screwdriver to the back, working at a hotel. It beggars belief. Or does it? Have we become desensitised and expectant of these things happening in our country? Is that not in and of itself reason for alarm? And each of those people murdered in that Manchester Arena bombing I mentioned, in the name of political correctness, because someone didn't want to get accused of racism for challenging someone with a backpack. Every single person who calls this country home wants change. And my friends, I have to ask, when will we get it? What will it take? Because I think the clampdown on the expression of outrage, the clampdown on the trading of information, the clampdown on speech in general, the censorship on speech in general, I think that's all too troubling, because it seeks to actually place the ideology of multiculturalism as sacrosanct above of our rights to debate, to speak, and to challenge. Well, that's my thoughts, but more important than my gob is your gob, and actually, well, less important than your gob still, but crucially important, is our panel who readily await in Grimes's Grotto. But your comments are coming in thick and fast. We'll try and get through some of them. Thank you very much for sending them. But let's introduce the panel, shall we? Because it's time for this. Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody?
Good,
thanks, Darren.
good.
Yes, of course, Younes, Alex and Chloe join me now. Guys, a lot of the questions, they're very angry. Some of them I can't read out, and I do have to tell everybody that I'm afraid you need to be as cautious as you possibly can be, because, you know, the way in which they've clamped down on the riots will pale in significance to the way in which they will clamp down on anyone that makes any form of what they deem to be stirring up hatred, stirring up resentment, stirring up inciting violence, or in any way, shape or form trying to allege something that hasn't been proven in a court of law. So we do have to keep that in mind and be careful. But on the specifics of the timing of the announcement, without going into detail, please, I have to reiterate that because I don't want any of you to go to prison. I wonder, were all of you, each of you, surprised and dismayed by the timing of the announcement?
Yes, 100%. I'm absolutely disgusted by the fact that they always withhold information from us, and then they call us conspiracy theorists for pointing out the obvious. Because I made a video about the whole thing that happened way back in, I think it was May. And actually, Tommy Robinson retweeted my video, and we got like 500,000 views on X. And for some reason, I don't know if you remember, Chloe, it wouldn't let me upload on Instagram for some reason. Remember that video we kept trying to upload on Instagram? It wouldn't let it upload. And then we uploaded it on X. It got great traction. And I mentioned in that video that, you know, the guy that done the stabbing could be an extremist, right? And then they were saying, oh, you're anti-immigrant, you're lying about the background. They wait for the rally to happen. They wait for Tommy Robinson to come back. They wait for him to be arrested and then thrown in jail. And then all of a sudden, they're happy to tell us about the background of the gentleman that committed those crimes. So it's just absolutely disgusting. And it's not the first time they've done this. They do this all the time.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, on the point of the fact that Tommy has been put in Belmarsh, I mean, the kinds of people that he's alongside, you know, the kind of jihadis that he's been warned against, as I said earlier, I mean, it strikes me as deliberately cruel, actually.
Yeah, this is such a minefield, Darren, and I know I am so frustrated in the position I'm in, and I know the public are as well, because there's so much I would love to say. There's so much I would love to say, and I can't believe, first of all, before we get into that we're living in a society where my words will be used against me. It's lawfare, first of all. Let's just remember that since this government is sat in office, that they have weaponized the judicial system like no other political party in history has ever done before. So I'm extremely frustrated. Putting Tommy in prison is a stretch. It's a stretch. Weaponizing the terrorism law, in my opinion, is a stretch. Now, I don't know the facts of the case. I don't know the facts well enough. The police haven't given us a lot of detail, so I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't know what they know that we don't know. But I feel like it's a difficult position for Tommy to be put in prison, in a dangerous prison that is as well. We know there's a lot of extremists in those prisons who are indiscriminate when it comes to challenging those who are also in those prisons with them. I've seen some of the behind-the-scenes footage. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot this government will have to answer for to the British public about the timing and the shall I say this carefully, in the way in which they have handled the release of information about the operational decisions and the political decisions that have led up to the information that was released yesterday.
Yes, and I think when we do eventually find that out, and we will, I think it's going to make for interesting reading and I think it could well be pretty damning on Sir Keir Starmer and on Yvette Cooper, who I have to say, as Home Secretary, is my idea of total hell. So, but Chloe, on the point that Tommy makes there, the admin on Tommy's account, because obviously he can't post on X from Belmarsh, but he says hundreds of the concerned British public are currently sitting in prison, violent and sexual criminals freed to make way for them. Peter Lynch died. Of course, you did a video on Peter Lynch, actually, and many have argued he was a political prisoner and his life has been taken completely without any justification or any semblance of justice within that decision to imprison him, given what we now potentially know. And he says, the admin says, Tommy Robinson is in maximum security prison and the family who attacked the police at Manchester Airport still haven't been charged. It does get people on to the element of there is a two-tier justice system at play here.
I mean, I don't even think it's a question anymore, unless they are insanely incompetent. I mean, there's just no way that you can justify people being thrown behind bars at the snap of a fingers for Facebook posts, whilst these guys at Manchester Airport, we've got the CCTV footage. Maybe there are a few questions, but I think it's very clear to me that those are bad guys that did a bad thing. They beat up a woman, absolutely disgusting in my eyes. How are they still walking the streets? How haven't they been charged at all? It just doesn't make sense. And then the timing of it all, as we say, the timing is very suspicious. And Dominic Cummings put up a good tweet on this, yes. saying that number 10 will have known about what's come about the Southport stabber. They will have known that right from the start, but they kept it from us. And as you say, Darren, Richard Tice raises a very good question there, and Keir Starmer tried to walk his way out of it and suggest that Richard Tice is stopping the police from doing their job. But as Richard says, the advice has been to the government, it sounds like, that information that is important like that should not be withheld. And then when it may just be pure coincidence, the timing of this coming, say, right by the budget, thinking, we'll distract them with the budget so that this doesn't become, another riot or something. There's that. But then also with the Tommy situation, I don't know for sure, but I think there's a question to be asked of, is it a coincidence that this has come out sort of just after Tommy's been put behind bars? It may not be a coincidence. They may have done that on purpose, waited for him to be put behind bars so that he can't start tweeting about it.
Yeah. I think can I just piggyback very quickly off the back of that from Chloe? I think the question mark is whether it was done deliberately before the rally was taking place. As you know, there were comments from journalists and media outlets about a week ago considering releasing this story. There was also confirmation that the trial had been postponed through Guido Fawkes by a week. And so there's some serious questions there. Why does that happen? And let's, Chloe, you raised a really great point. I was tweeting about this earlier. And what earth does the Home Secretary, does MI5 not know this man has downloaded potentially terrorist materials and was potentially allegedly creating a biological weapon? How was that not found out within hours of his arrest? Either the government didn't, genuinely only found out recently as they said they had, in which case there is utter incompetence at the top, or they did know and have kept it out of public domain, which, in my opinion, is lying to the face of the British public.
But just to play devil's advocate, and this is because I come from a background of being regulated by bloody Ofcom, but the police would say we do not want to jeopardise the court case. We do not want to see this man get off scot-free because of the fact that someone has prejudiced the case whereas the jury hears something that may cloud and bias their view on the trial or of the individual, and therefore the merits of the legal argument against him would be rendered unsafe. So they would argue that actually that is a robust principle, that, you know, the right to a fair trial absolutely has to be sacrosanct. I mean, what would you say to that argument? Are you is commentary on this area in general just totally out of proportion?
Well, look, there's always a legal argument to be made, and I want to be very clear that I'm not trying to subvert the court of justice or the trial in any way, shape, or form. I'm asking operational questions about the government's handling of the situation that's completely separate from whether the suspect is guilty or not. It is whether the government have withheld information that should be in public domain. Let's not forget that it's only recent precedent that the British police have not released information to the public. For many, many other incidents, the British public have been informed very quickly. So I'm asking operational questions about the government's handling of the situation, not about whether the man in question has done anything right or wrong. He is innocent until proven guilty under a court of law, and so should be.
And I tell you what, if you can manage to get through 2,000 of the so-called far-right protesters into courts in 24 hours, and you can turn around those kinds of time frames, then why are we waiting until January of next year for the court case of this individual who is allegedly the murderer of young girls? Why is that?
And Manchester Airport as well, still waiting.
Manchester Airport, and Andy points out as well, Nick Lowles of Hope Not Hate hasn't felt the arm of the law for his false tweets about acid attacks against Muslims that were made during said riots. And he even got a Channel 4 documentary series for his trouble. You know, they said, oh, well, Tommy Robinson, you know, told a few untruths. Nick Lowles told a few untruths, but we like Nick Lowles, so we don't like Tommy Robinson, so we'll give Nick Lowles a documentary. It's not a two-tier justice. It's a two-tier society that we live in.
No, it's just corruption at the very highest level. And obviously, they're doing this on purpose. And if people are clever and smart, they can see through this. They withheld information in order to be able to frame people like Tommy Robinson and the far right in a certain way, whilst they were the ones speaking the truth. And it's a two-tier policing, because obviously they didn't want to come out and say this guy has terrorist materials on his phone, because it would prove people like Tommy Robinson right. And they couldn't prosecute him, they couldn't throw him in jail.
Well, he was found guilty of contempt of court. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That is true. Because it's a big crime, by the way, contempt of court, lying in courts. But you know,
the court heard from Aidan in the Tommy case, Aidan Eardie Casey, that this was most egregiously expressed through a documentary that Tommy displayed in Trafalgar Square, which three of us in this chat were at. And for Robinson's defence, the KC representing Tommy said that he was a journalist committed to bringing more information into the public, who passionately believed in freedom of expression and the freedom of the press. But there was one aspect of, and this is from Charlie Peters from GB News, by the way, and I'm, to be perfectly frank, quite surprised that this article is on their website, but hey-ho. And he says one aspect of the mitigation submission stood out in particular, how Robinson had fared during his last stint in prison. He was previously jailed for another contempt of court breach after incidents at the Crown Court sitting in Canterbury and Leeds, a period of 3.5 months in which it was said that Robinson was held in solitary confinement. Now, Charlie points out that technically there's no such thing in British prison systems, but some prisoners are held in a more limited condition, either for their own safety or if they pose a greater risk to the prison population. Now, Robinson was held in such conditions during that last stint, and they had a massive impact on his mental health. He had depression, anxiety, other mental health struggles. They were all read out in a court of law, which must have been pretty difficult for him in general. But now he's held in a court with some of the world's most dangerous killers and terrorists, Islamists that seek to radicalise others, kept in isolation, and the double category AA wing houses, though prisoners who can't be trusted to exist peacefully alongside others. A contempt of court charge, really?
Yeah.
Though, is this the kind of environment he should be held in these position. I just find that, I think that is a brutalization, a weaponization of the system, and I don't think anyone can reasonably argue that that is fair or just in any sense of the word.
But they don't do that on purpose, though. They are doing it on purpose. Sorry, Chloe, I'm just saying they're doing it on purpose. They're trying to kill him. Like, they're trying to put him in prison, in the most dangerous prison, and they want other prison inmates to attack him. As a matter of fact, where he was living in London when he was free was one of the most heavily concentrated Muslim populations in that area. So why are you putting him there when he could get attacked? So it's very obvious. I know one of his bodyguards, or one of the guys that does close protection for him, is this guy called Vaughan. And he said they're doing this on purpose because they are trying to kill him. The same concept applies when he goes to prison.
So if you listen to if you listen to, it's really interesting, the Jordan Peterson podcast with Tommy, where he goes in depth and talks about his previous prison experiences. So he says he was in a prison where he was perfectly fine. There were, little to no Islamist gangs there that were going to threaten him. He could, roam around the prison without any problem. And then one day they just came in and announced, we're moving you to this other prison, one filled with these gangs that, are really out to get him. Yeah. And he was asking, why are you moving there? Why are you moving me there? And, they just wouldn't give him a reason, just arbitrarily. They're like, no, we're going to move you to this horrible one where you're going to be attacked. And they he claims in the podcast that they then put him in a room with one of these gangs and just allowed them to literally beat the shit out of him. They knocked his teeth out, and then he was in his room, which he couldn't leave. He was terrified to leave, and he wouldn't eat any of the food at the prison because he was so scared that it was going to be poisoned. So the only food that he would eat was the amount of tin tuna that he could afford to buy with the coppers that he had. And he lost something like 30 kilos whilst he was in there because he was so scared to touch the proper food. I mean, you would think that this man is, they've used terrorist charges, you'd think that he is some awful, horrendous terrorist, or, someone who's gone on some sort of homicide mission and killed a load of people. No. This is a journalist we're talking about. We're talking about a journalist exposing grooming gangs. You may not completely love the guy and think he's perfect, but I mean, can we all agree that this is very, very out of proportion punishment?
Definitely. And Charlie Peters at GB News concludes by saying, nobody is above the law, and egregious and repeated breaches of contempt rules will land anyone in jail. But, crucially, for Robinson, that punishment will be disproportionate. Due to its failure to maintain an adequate and safe prisons estate, Robinson will endure a punishment unlike any other contemner. Now, I actually think, even if we had the nicest prison population in the world and our prisons were empty, that even then they would still put him in the worst surroundings that they possibly could. But that you mentioned that tweet, Chloe, and I just want to bring it up because I'm very professional like this and it took me about 20 minutes. But anyway, this tweet from Dom Cummings, he says, who could possibly have predicted that the mainstream official sources / media were lying as usual about crime, terrorism, Islam? Number 10 will have known the truth almost immediately. The police did, which will have been almost immediately. And who could possibly have predicted that the NPC, that means what, non-player candidate? What does it mean, Younes?
Character, non-playable character.
That's it. Non-player character, I'm getting old. Pundits like Friedman and Porters and Catwallow peddled the official bullshit whilst 24/7, while babbling the whole time about disinformation and Islamophobia, while from fascists like Elon Musk, and demanding people be locked up for spreading, quote, disinformation. NPC pundits are the disinformation. It's been shoved out because of the budget and US election, hoping most voters don't see how they were lied to by official systems yet again. The system is working as intended. Now, that's pretty damning, actually, because he was the second most powerful person in the Boris Johnson administration.
Yeah. Darren, I think this goes back to what I was saying before at the start. It is incredible to seriously believe that the government have only found this out recently. And the BBC News put a notification out. So I'm quoting the press here before Keir Starmer comes after me, sends his dogs after me. He said that they only knew a few weeks ago. Well, what the hell does a few weeks ago even mean? That's not a date. That's not specific. Let's be clear. As Dominic Cummings said, a man who's worked at the highest tiers of government, the Prime Minister would have known within hours what was going on, all whilst the riots were happening.
Yeah.
So we have to start asking questions.
And people were being imprisoned, of course.
People were being imprisoned for speculating. And again, while the government have information that is within the interest of the public to know, you may not like the response the public give, but it is in a democratic society where freedom of expression is protected. The public have a right to know.
I'm not sure it is. To be honest, I've never been more scared to actually use my voice, but I still do it. But I'm expecting the stormtroopers to knock down the door.
Well, we shouldn't cower.
Me too.
I think this is the moment we need to fight. We shouldn't let this case put us down. I feel like this is the most important time we should carry on fighting. We have to be careful with our language. But if we stop now, the establishment wins. So we shouldn't let them win.
Well, I totally agree with you, Younes, but I think it shines a light on the situation our country is in,
yes,
where the law is being weaponized against people like us. And let's be honest, we're young people who are commenting our voice, using our voices. We're not doing it to incite hatred. We're not doing it to incite violence. We're not doing it to try and change the courts or the justice system. We're doing it because we're genuinely concerned that our country is heading in a direction that can only be prescribed what happened in the 1940s, where there were people running swathes of Europe where they used law and the military to crack down on political opponents and lock them up. These are what we see in evil governments across the world. This is what happens. And I don't want the country that
Trump
to die for.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. In happy
news,
so,
let's not forget, Remembrance Day is coming up soon.
Yeah.
Millions of British people gave their lives for the right of people like us to sit on this podcast and say these things out loud.
Yeah,
they gave their lives for that.
Can I just say, I've been trying to buy a poppy, and I mean, I know it's early, but you know, I've been round Waterloo station several times, and all the stations where there normally are some for sale, and I haven't seen any for sale. And I don't know if this is still because of, I don't know if you remember last year, the poppy sellers were being attacked by the pro-Palestine protesters, but I haven't been able to buy one. It's weird how quiet it is. So I wonder if they're still worried for their safety. These
Chloe.
poor, old ladies and old men selling the poppies.
You can get yourself a nice trans one off of the website. So,
oh, great!
In happier news, the Newcastle score is 2 to Newcastle and Chelsea 0. So that's happy news.
Very good news.
Anyway, right, I'm going to move on now from the grotto. I'm going to leave you, Grotto, and you're going to have a think about what you think about the budget and the thin gruel that the country has been fed. As Robert Jenrick's suggested, we've gone from the era of boom and bust to gloom and rust. That was I added the rust part. I quite like that. Anyway, right, we're going to introduce our next guest because we've actually got Lance Forman, who is a former Brexit Party MEP, but he is also a businessman who has a very successful family business, which I think has to be the most delicious family business in the whole of these beautiful isles. And he will have some words to say, I would suggest, on what that budget actually offered the United Kingdom, if anything. So I'll see you all shortly. Don't go anywhere. But now it's time for this. Lance Forman, thank you very much for your company. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm very good. How are you doing?
Marvellous, thank you, marvellous. Lance, I want to play you a little clip from our good friend Rishi Sunak. Well, actually, I'm sure you got to see it. He basically suggested that they haven't been straight with the public, and that actually Labour are being utterly duplicitous. I mean, if you consider that Labour's economic wonderland, they suggest that actually high taxes and heavy regulation are going to help the whole country. Do you actually think that this budget will help or hinder your ability to hire and train people in your business? I mean, you must have noticed that there are precious little incentive for businesses such as your own to actually hire younger, inexperienced people because they're putting up the costs and they're reducing the incentives, aren't they?
Well, I don't know, Dan, because I'm going to be spending all my time in the pub because beer is going to be 1p less per pint.
Ooh.
I mean, God, really? That got the biggest cheer in the House of Commons today.
Yeah,
It's just
pathetic.
pathetic. I mean, it really is just embarrassing. Not just Labour, the entire political class, focusing on that absolute nonsense when our country is in absolute dire straits. And, you know, they talk about us needing a budget for growth. We do need growth. You can't fund public services unless you have a successful private economy that's employing people, that's profitable, that can pay tax to fund the public services. And what Labour delivered today was a budget that it'll hinder that. It's not going to help businesses. It was an anti-business budget.
Yeah.
Business wants to be able to employ people and it wants to be able to invest. And the two main taxes they put up today were taxes on employing people and taxes on investment. So it's going to have a complete disincentive effect on business. It was a really bad budget.
I mean, the national insurance point as well, right? Of actually that being tweaked, so employers have to pay more in the way of employment national insurance contributions. I love how they say contributions as if I have a choice to pay it, but you know what I mean. And it's supposedly
Down. I mean, that was a massive hit. This is how much it's going to cost. If you're a small business and you employ people like we do, we employ about 50, 60 people.
Yeah.
On average, they've been with us for 14 years. So we really look after our staff. We don't employ high and fire and they're off within a few months. We look after our staff, and that's what good businesses do. If you pay your staff £30,000 a year, which is a reasonable sort of salary, difficult still if you're living in London, £30,000 a year, it will cost your business an extra £1,000 per year for that employee on the increase they've done today. So we employ 50, 60 people. That's going to cost us something like £50,000 to £60,000 a year. Yeah. That one little change. So it's all said very quickly, in a little speech. It's sort of tucked in there. This is going to be a killer for businesses. Why would I want to employ more people? In fact, I'm going to have to look at how I can save that money. Do I put my prices up to cover it? But then if I put my prices up, I might lose customers, and then I'll have a worse business situation and I'll have to lay off people. This is going to be, it's really, really challenging for businesses who are already having a tough time. We've come out of COVID, all those challenges. The war, energy costs screw business big time.
Well, we'll get on to that. We'll get on to
and now we're making this national insurance things are really bad news.
Well said, because I think you're right. It's brushed over and the media sort of shrugs their shoulders. But if you've got your foot on the pedal and you're trying to survive as a small to medium-sized enterprise, you're going to be really hard hit by that. But
even a large enterprise, if you employ a lot of people, it's going to be very costly. And that's another interesting thing. A business like ours, and our business, Darren, we're an artisan business. We take pride in doing things by hand in a very traditional, way. We're not a mass producer that has lots of machinery and just conveyor belts and that sort of stuff. So we employ a lot of people, which is great for the economy. We're the ones that are going to be punished here by employing people. If we just had machines instead, we wouldn't be punished as badly because we wouldn't have people, we'd have machines. So it's really bad.
I mean, famously, Napoleon was rumoured to have said that Britain was just a nation of shopkeepers. I mean, not if Labour get their bloody way, that's for sure. But the inheritance tax stuff, right? The inheritance tax adjustment, apparently that's intended to actually level the playing field. The specification around traditional businesses and farms that it's meant to be helping, that won't help farms stay in the family, right? I see this as an attack on landowners, on farming communities, farming families, to actually give up the ghost and say, well, because of energy prices, which we will get onto, so don't focus on those just yet, but when actually farming is getting more expensive, harder to do, farmers are committing suicide, it's all pretty rough out there. It's an invitation for them to just give up their farms and sell off to developers. You know, maybe Ed Miliband is rubbing his hands with glee at the idea of paving over these former farming properties into solar farms and all these other things, actually erasing what's left of British produce. Now, you're a British producer. Do you worry that actually they just don't give a damn about Britain being self-sufficient in that regard? Do you have any concerns about that? Do you think this is deliberate?
Not only do I think they don't give a damn, I don't think they understand. I don't think they understand what it takes to create a business and pass it on down the generations. This doesn't just affect farms, it again affects businesses like ours. You know, if I pop my clogs one day, hopefully not for a long time, if my business goes on through the we're a fourth generation business. If it went down to the fifth generation under the new tax regime that they passed today, my family will have to pay 20% of the value of my business in tax. Now, where are they going to get that cash from to pay the tax? They're not going to have it. So what they'll have to do is sell the business, which will mean that the fourth generation business will never become a fifth generation business, or a second generation will never become a third, or even a first will never become a second. You won't be able to have, there's so much positivity around family businesses, and they just don't understand it at all. Over 90% of businesses in the UK are family-run businesses. Over 90%. They employ the vast majority of people in this country too. This government, by what it did today, is going to be destroying the future of family businesses, which is absolutely tragic.
Well said, Lance. Well said. Oh, come on, then. Let's get on to a issue that really does, I think, get the two of us in quite the rage, which is the net zero ambitions. I mean, do you think that actually, Rachel Reeves was stood at the dispatch box and she's saying, we've got this 22 billion black hole. By the way, the Office for Budget Responsibility has said, well, we found a, £7 billion black hole. We ain't found a 22 billion pound black hole. But anyway, regardless on the size of this supposed black hole, the fact of the matter is they found a load of money for foreign aid as far as climate change is concerned abroad, almost 12 billion quid. They also found 22 billion right there, about maybe 25 billion for carbon capture and storage, which has never actually been proven to work. It's never been proven to be affordable on scale. And the fact of the matter is we're just spaffing this money up the wall in trying to keep Greta Thunberg and the green elites at Davos happy, whilst Britain's pensioners and the rest of the population freeze and struggle, and businesses like yours, quite energy intensive, simply cannot function and have to put up their prices as a consequence of the sheer scale of the cost of energy. This is a nightmare for the economy and for businesses like yours, isn't it?
Well, it's a complete delusion. It's because people like Ed Miliband seem to think that, the UK flooding in 200 years' time is a bigger risk to the nation than World War III, which could break out anytime soon, the way things are looking in, Russia and Iran and, potentially with China. This is not a serious threat. We should not be focusing on this now. We are being just literally economically suicidal here in Britain, spending all this money on net zero, which not every scientist in the world agrees with it. There are many, scientists that completely disagree with it. But the point is, other countries around the world aren't doing it. So we're just exporting our carbon to other countries. We're not helping the planet. We're just making ourselves look good. It's idiotic. Americans spend about something like a quarter to a sixth of what we do for energy. And when Trump gets back in a couple of weeks' time, which I'm sure he will do, they're going to be going hell for leather, even more so now with fracking. That is what we should have been doing. We should have been doing it in the last few years. Literally, the gas comes out the ground, you set fire to it, you got energy. It's there. It's the cheapest form of energy we could possibly have. We literally have treasure under our feet, and we're looking at it and saying, nah, let's just keep it there. We'd rather have 1p off a pint of beer. It's idiotic. These guys, they don't get it at all. They don't get what it takes. And we've got to take some bold decisions.
And I can remember, when Donald Trump said we're going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords that Obama had signed them up to. And everyone said, America's carbon emissions will go through the roof. Well, actually, if you compare during the Trump administration, America's climate emissions versus that of the EU, America's went down faster by the fact that there was this shale gas revolution. So, it actually turned out to be cleaner and greener than whatever the European Union was doing, which is probably gobbling up President Putin's coal. But there we are. None of this makes sense, Lance. It's absolute insanity. Now, I have to ask you to end then. You mentioned there, family business, handing it down to the next generations looking incredibly difficult. If you was to start up today, Lance, in this high tax, high regulation environment, would you just advise your kids to not bother and to just go abroad?
If the truth be known, Darren, I think I would do exactly that. The number one reason why family businesses give up, and I've had discussions with, corporate financiers that specialize in buying and selling family businesses. So this isn't just a made up view. The number one reason why they pack their bags and decide to give it all up is not because they can't make a profit. It's not because they're taxed too much. It's because they come into work one day and they just say, you know what, I'm completely fed up with all the red tape and the rules and regulations, and they just give up the will to live. They say, there's probably enough money in the bank now for my retirement. I'm just giving up with the business. It's the regulations. I mean, tax is one thing, but the regulations are just draining. And I've been in our business now for 30 years. Yeah. And year after year, I just see more and more regulations. And you feel like you're coming to work every day, working for the government, not working for yourself and for your family.
That's what they want.
Yeah, and it's very draining. And it's I don't think that if I was 30, 40 years younger, I could start up the business that we run today and make a go of it. I think it's very challenging. And I think that's why, it's very hard for young people, for their future to actually see positive opportunities, because everything is just very challenging, because the government is just it just needs to get out of our hair and let us get on with it.
Well, finally, Lance, then, you were a Brexit Party MEP, that's now Reform. Do you ever think you might stand for Parliament, ever? Because, we could use some voices like yours in that chamber, that's for sure.
I have been asked many times, would I want to do it now? Probably not. I don't think I certainly wouldn't want to do it whilst I'm running a business, because I think it's impossible to do the two simultaneously. But, if the time comes when, I no longer have the business, perhaps, if I do sell it, perhaps, I don't know where the future lies. But, perhaps I would get more involved, whether I'd want to actually be in the House of Commons, the dispatch box debating. I'm not sure that's where I'd want to be after a hard grind of sort of 40, 50 years in the private sector. But I'm certainly very happy to offer my advice and knowledge. And you do, in business, you're on the receiving end of government legislation. So the impact of this stuff. So to be able to advise people on the impact of the rules and that they're putting in place, I think is also very important. There's not enough people with private sector experience in government, in the House of Commons, and certainly in the civil service.
Yeah, they vilify them. They all do jobs in think tanks in Westminster, these lefty think tanks, and then they think that that's a job and that qualifies them to be members of Parliament after being at Oxford and Cambridge studying politics, philosophy and economics. It just, Lance, I could go on all day. Lance, thank you very much for, I know, that's what I feel like doing. Lance, thank you very much for giving up your time tonight and taking us through the budget from, the thin gruel that we have been offered. Have a good night, mate. Thank you very much for your time.
First woman chancellor there.
Oh, well, at least
there's that. They're going to keep telling us that every day now for the next 5 years.
Oh, she will. All right, Lance. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, Take care.
Right, we're going to go back to this. Hello, hello, hello. Now, this was what Rishi Sunak, I couldn't get it up there earlier. Oh gosh, that was a choice turn of phrase, wasn't it?
It's a bit of a slip there, Darren.
Someone said to me, Rishi Sunak was really good today, and I haven't actually watched what he said. So I'll let the viewers see this. Someone's commented saying not funny. I hope that's not my lewd joke. But anyway, let's play this.
On the day that he took office,
he's very quiet.
The Prime Minister said that he wanted to restore trust to British politics with action, not words. Well, today, his actions speak for themselves, with a budget that contains broken promise after broken promise, and reveals the simple truth that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have not been straight with the British people. Time and again, we Conservatives warned Labour would tax, borrow and spend far beyond what they were telling the country. And time and again, they denied they had such plans. But today, the truth has come out. Proof that they planned to do this all along. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's budget sees the fiscal rules fiddled, borrowing increased by billions of pounds, inflation-busting handouts for the trade unions, Britain's poorest pensioners squeezed, welfare spending out of control, and a spree of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. Pensions tax, up. They have fiddled the figures. I don't like it, but this is the truth. They have...
Well, that is very good. I mean, Steve says the speech of Rishi's life, he says, and Alex says it's a shame Rishi wasn't this fiery as Prime Minister. I mean, I agree. Where was this Rishi throughout his time in office? What a shame. What a waste. Because that was...
Well, I mean, clearly he's now angry because he's now seen, after all those years of Labour standing there, every PMQ's attacking him for everything, claiming they've got a magic money tree, they'll fix all the problems without raising any taxes. And him just, I'm not saying Rishi Sunak's perfect, right? But I think, Darren, you've said a few times that you're starting to miss him a bit. He seems like quite amazing compared to Keir Starmer. I would be very, very angry if I was in Rishi or Jeremy Hunt's position listening to that budget come out today. It's kind of like we told you so, you didn't listen. I mean, we've had clips coming out today from during the election campaign when we had debates, Rishi warning about the fact that your taxes would go up under Labour, and it just... Go on.
Sorry, Chloe. Tracy has just commented saying, white people, white, because she said it reminds her of the infamous Hamza Yusuf speech. When he's saying taxes up, the judiciary, white, the whole of Scotland, white.
Well, I have to say, I rate this speech a lot more than Hamza Yusuf's one.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
so let's
interrupted
just get something straight. This Labour government wants to pay 200 billion in reparations to the Caribbean, yet they want to increase taxes by the scale of 40 billion for the normal British people. Yes. So is that what they want to do? Is that what they're saying they want to do? They want to pay reparations to these countries all over the world, and they're advocating for it, by the way, and they want to raise, because overall they're going to raise taxes by 40 billion. It's going to cost the total economy 40 billion a year in extra taxes on everything.
Lance, did you all agree with Lance as well, what he was explaining as a businessman himself, that actually if we continue like this, there will be no family-owned businesses to hand down to the next generation, and that means fewer jobs for people, because, as Lance said, they are a major employer in this economy.
Well, I mean, I was just looking up whilst he was talking the proportion that small to medium enterprises make up, and they make up 99.9% of the business population and employ 16.7 million people in this country. I think Labour, they live in this bubble where they think anyone who, as Keir Starmer might claim a working person is, anyone who doesn't receive a monthly pay packet is some rich millionaire, billionaire business owner sitting on a huge pot of cash that they're just spending on Porsches and mansions. It could not be further from the truth. The majority of businesses are just trying to make ends meet. And, as Lance says, they've had a pretty rough ride as it is with COVID and everything. They're just trying to get back on their feet. Remember, you had businesses having to pay their rents for, their shops and any premises they have throughout COVID. It's not like the landlords stopped asking for rent payments and whatnot. They had a pretty horrendous time. Many of them closed down. It's a miracle those that are still alive are still alive. To give them this slap in the face now, I think is just absolutely horrendous. And we've got a cabinet who, I think aside from, if you count James Timpson, who's not an MP but is the prisons minister, we haven't got any. I don't think we've got anyone that is an entrepreneur in the cabinet. And as Lance says, we really do have a deficit of people with business experience in government and especially in cabinet. And I think that, very clearly this government is out of touch with how this country operates.
I don't know how you dare, Chloe. Sir Keir Starmer is, of course, a businessman. He's in the business of banging people up. So Lewis has sent us a super chat on YouTube. Thank you very much, Lewis. Your support really does help and is valued. We love you lots.
Very
Thank
kind.
you ever so much. Now, I want to play this. Younes, you liked this clip of Farage speaking about the budget. So let's have a little gander at what he had to say.
The big picture is we're in decline. We're getting poorer. There isn't a £22 billion black hole. That's nonsense.
He nearly said
it's 2.7 trillion. Our debt repayments are 90 billion a year. And from all the figures I've seen today, that will be worse in 5 years' time than it is today. We need a complete change of culture. We need to start saying success is a good thing. Making money is a great thing. People becoming rich is something we should encourage. We've got to change our culture of work. The idea that, oh yes, work from home, do a 4-day week, get your work-life balance right. Well, you know what, actually, why don't we say to people, young people, hard work is a good thing. Yeah. Hard work is the only way anybody succeeds individually. And hard work is the only way we're going to have a chance as a country to turn any of this around.
Yeah, I mean, good for him. Yeah. Younes, what was it that especially caught your eye about that?
There's a few statements in there that I both agree and disagree with. So obviously he's talking about the deficit, 2.7 trillion. That's true. And that's one of the reasons this country needs to start fracking, because I don't know where you're going to get that kind of money from. And also in America, I think they're like 33 trillion. So you need to start fracking for oil so you can sell your oil and also give it to your people.
Well, Younes, we're closing our North Sea oil and gas.
Yeah, but that's so completely stupid. Just look at what they've done in Saudi Arabia and in Dubai and Qatar. Look at the buildings they're building just because they've got oil. So I just don't understand this mentality of not wanting to frack for oil. That being said, I also agree with him that, look, this is a lifelong lefty thing. Oh, we don't want to be rich, hate the rich, the top 1%. They're the ones that are taking our money. They're so evil, blah, blah, blah. No, we need to encourage a culture of hard work, of success, and we should celebrate people that are hardworking, smart, and successful. We shouldn't say, oh, they're envy. We shouldn't be envious of them. We shouldn't try to take their money away. However, the last thing that I kind of disagree with, but also agree with them in some ways, is that people are now very lazy. They want this work-life balance. They don't really want to work hard. They want to live on a very bare minimum. But at the same time, I feel like COVID exposed most businesses that we do not need to be in the office every single day. Okay, we just don't. And it's actually worse for the environment because we have to do the commute to the work. It's going to take an hour there, an hour back. We're not getting paid for that money. So do we really need to be there in the office? I feel like there should be. People should be in the office 2 or 3 times a week, but it's not necessarily. But overall, with his message, I agree. You know,
I think there are elements of that, that office cooler, water cooler chat where, you get to speak to your colleagues, you bounce ideas off each other. I don't think you do the same thing over a Teams call that you've just dashed through to that started at 9 a.m., but you're still in your boxes at 9:01 a.m. and you dash through to your laptop. Maybe, but I'm not convinced that it is totally. And I realise before someone says, Darren Grimes, you are a total... I nearly swore there. Total bloody hypocrite, because you are sat in your home right now, which is true. But I also do go into an office. So, I think maybe a mix. Maybe you're right. Maybe a mix. But obviously not everyone can do that. There are going to be people that work in factories.
3 times a week, I would say, is perfect.
But Alex, on that point of non-doms, right, Younes says we need to actually encourage rich people. How many people in your world, which is the tech world for people that don't know, how many people in your world are saying, fuck this, I'm leaving this country? I just did swear there.
They're all going. All of them, Darren. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. There is not a single one. And I've been really fortunate in my career to work with some really wealthy people who have run businesses that have contributed billions to our economy. And not a single one of them is going to stick around for this. They're all factoring in. Yeah. They're all factoring in cost saving. They're all factoring in job losses. They're doing it now. They've been very proactive about this because the leaks of the budget have been around for a while. So businesses are not going to be hiring as much. The economy is going to slow down. And it comes back to that famous quote: "You cannot tax your way to growth." It's like it's like standing in a bucket and trying to lift it up while you stand inside it. You cannot do that. You need to incentivize businesses to spend money on the public, who therefore spend money on other businesses, then therefore we grow the economy. It's very simple economics 101. And what Labour have done today is doom our economy for the next 4 years. And if they stay in for longer, it will be a decade. And if a decade they stay in for, this country is utterly becoming a third world nation. That's where we're going.
Well, Chloe, just to make the point of how puerile the Labour Parliamentary Party actually is and how weak and, going back to what Lance said, how absolutely dire the talent is on the benches of that party, and none of them have a business job. They're all from these lefty think tanks and they come through as MPs or charities and all these other NGOs. I dare say some of them work for some form of migrant NGOs getting in the illegals. But this woman here pushes the Russia hoax onto Farage, and she, as he's actually criticising the first budget in 14 years. I saw this and I said to our guy who works with us, a brilliant guy called Alex Cox, I said to him, Alex, find me this clip whilst I was busy preparing this podcast. I'm making myself sound like a bit of a diva now. And he found this clip and he tears into Labour's budget, but this woman decides to pop up and talk about Russia instead. And this is what she had to say. Honestly, it is pathetic. She ought to be bloody embarrassed, but she's done it to look good on social media. And the fact that she does to these lefties in this country, I think says it bloody well all.
Very badly indeed. I will give way.
Sarah.
He was courteous enough to give way to this woman, and this is what she had to say.
The honourable gentleman for giving way, and I just question, when he talks about investment in our country and in businesses, whether he'd prefer to have investment from our government or whether he'd prefer to have investment from maybe the Russian government.
Maybe one or two members of the House ought simply to grow up, but there we are. It's a bit sad.
What?
Very badly indeed.
So he says
I would like to have investment from everyone.
One or two members of the House ought simply to
He says, I think
grow up.
one or two members of the House ought simply to grow up, and I couldn't agree with him
Well,
more,
well
Chloe.
said. Good on him for saying that. I mean, first of all, if they want the people investing in this country to be Brits, they should stop pushing the Brits out the country to places with lower tax regimes by taxing them to death. Then you won't have to bring in a bunch of Russian tycoons and rich people from Dubai to buy houses and put money in this country. Okay, cool. And then also, we need to stop strangling North Sea oil and gas so that we can make our own stuff rather than have to bring it in from Russia. Maybe that lady should have a think about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but then the underlying point she's trying to make is that, well, you're in the pocket of the Russians, so whatever you say, we shouldn't listen to because you're getting bribed by the Russians. That's what she's actually saying, you know?
That's right.
And fundamentally, I just feel like now, I've said this before, but this country is going to go really downhill for the next 5 years. All the rich people are going to go. All the businesses are going to go. You would be happy not to know that I actually got my American visa now.
Oh,
and so I can go there. And I was thinking maybe I'm just going to go there for a few months to maybe a year. I'm just going to see how long I can stay there. But I was actually genuinely thinking to move to America, especially if Trump wins, because I'm not staying in this country anymore. I'm just starting to get
Your visa not have an end time on it, Younes.
Well, it will.
Well, unfortunately, you've only got 90
it's
days
5 years.
before the
It's
IRS
5
will be
years.
after you, Younes. But
No, the thing is, it's
Wait,
not.
you've
It's not
got a
unfortunately.
5-year visa. How do you manage that?
Yeah, because because I had to apply for a visa, and I applied for a independent journalist visa, and I got it.
Right.
So it's 5 years. So, and I can stay there for as long as I want, and I can work
Oh,
there.
well, that was
funnily enough.
easy.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, I would go to America, but I don't think they'd be able to understand a fucking word I've got to say, so that won't be ideal, will it?
No, but genuinely, people are leaving more than you can imagine, and I just think London is not the same as it used to be. Even the nightlife is not the same as it used to be.
London's
So it's
not.
just. Yeah, London. I don't think anywhere is. I just feel like the best people are leaving. They're either going to Dubai or they're going to Miami or something like that. Everyone's leaving this country, or the rich people are leaving this country. So I just don't think it's a good environment to be anymore. It's
what I
10
think
years
this
ago,
whole
London was
budget-
the best city in the world.
What I think this whole budget shows is that Labour in general is exactly what the Tories and Reform have called it out to be for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, because they've been out of office for such a long time and the Tories have made a mess of the last 14 years, we've indulged in the Labour Party again, which is they are not a party of business. They are not a party. They portray themselves to be in a run-up to election. And as Rishi said, they've lied to get themselves into power. They said, we will not. I mean, there's so many clips. Even Sky News are having meltdowns. I put on my Twitter a clip of Beth Rigby. She looks completely dumbfounded. She's losing her marbles. She's going, I've never seen anything like this. They've said in their manifesto they wouldn't raise any taxes. And then when it comes to it, they've raised, 70 billion in public spending and 41 billion in taxes. Even Sly News can't come to terms with it. The same people that were I don't want to use the word I want to say actually, but when the election results were announced, they were all very, very happy. They didn't think there was a dry seat in the House.
Oh God!
And this is the same people. It's the same people who are now like their sort of jaws on the floor. Beth
I don't want to
Rigby's having
think
an
about
absolute
Beth
meltdown.
Rigby's kitty.
I didn't
Thank
say
you very
anything.
much.
I didn't say anything
Right,
like that,
guys.
Darren.
This
Behave
budget, in
yourselves.
terms of tax and spend, is £74 billion in spending by the end of this Parliament, £41 billion in tax rises. I have done a number of budgets, and this scorecard, in terms, I have never seen anything like it, and I've done this for 15 years. It's the biggest budget I have ever covered. It is incredibly definitive in terms of a kind of very Labour budget of big tax and big spend. But I think the issue here is while Rachel Reeves talked there about choices, Rishi Sunak gave the counter-argument, which I think will now be chewed over ferociously, actually, which is this was not laid out in the manifesto. This is not what the Labour government implied. When I asked the Prime Minister at our leaders' debate in Grimsby, are there any tax rises beyond this? He said there are no plans to raise taxes, and now look where they are.
Well.
Look at that. I mean, that she can't believe it. She can't believe it. She's even calling out the lies in their manifesto.
And that might be why then that Starmer himself, of course, banging up the British public for protesting against the atrocities that have taken place in the country, raising taxes when he says he wouldn't. He's lied through his teeth. And in power for just 115 days, this was yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer's approval rating among a deeply pessimistic public has taken a historic nosedive, collapsing a record 49 points since post-election polling. And very interestingly, one of our viewers says that the commentator Rod Liddle, who used to be at the BBC, funnily enough, which it beggars belief, and is now a writer for The Spectator and The Sun newspaper, Richard says, have you heard Rod Liddell suggest Starmer may quit as he realises he is hated and not up to the job? Could that be why he keeps calling Rishi Sunak Prime Minister? I mean, is he going to call Kemi Badenoch Prime Minister or Rob Jenrick Prime Minister? Is this the way it's going to go until he resigns and hands over the absolute crap that he's a so-called legacy he's made for himself in all that time?
I mean, I think that he'll last at least another year, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone obvious to replace him, because who are you going to replace him with?
worse.
Rachel Reeves or David Lammy or Angela Rayner? I mean,
it will be Angela Rayner.
It will be Angela Rayner, but we know that or maybe the membership will like that, but those in Westminster are not going to bring about that change. Just going back to Beth Rigby there, I think that she is now very frustrated after 2 interviews that she did with Keir Starmer. So the first interview being where she was questioning him when we had the whole Lord Alley stuff, where she was asking him about this 20 grand spent on GCSE accommodation for his son. And she's saying, do you not see how that looks? Do you not see how that could come across in the public's eye? And he's like, no, every parent would do the same. And he was just completely oblivious to the fact that it may have a negative impact. And she was just gobsmacked there. So I think that was a wake-up call for her. And then obviously the interview that's gone round recently of her asking him what is a working person, and he starts talking about checkbooks and whatnot, trying to avoid the question, and it was just gobsmackingly terrible. So I think Beth Rigby has woken up to the fact that this is a government of pure incompetence.
Because we've gone from Sly News making these orgasmic noises when actually Labour was elected as a government to now making, she's gone from soaking her seat to making it dry as a bone, Alex.
Well, this is the thing, and I really do believe that journalists in general were so distracted and thought that the Tory government was the worst of the worst. And trust me, I was very critical of the Tories. But I think all of us were so dumbfounded that the Tories were doing so badly that surely Labour couldn't be this bad.
Yeah.
And now we're getting to the realisation that they aren't just bad, they are substantially worse.
Yeah.
And that they are nowhere near as good as covering up their lies as the Tories were. Frankly, that's the truth.
Yeah, this is the worst government I've ever seen. And honestly, the Tories, at least what they didn't do is to cut pensioners, and they cut the winter fuel payments and just raising taxes on everyone. They were bad, but they weren't this bad, at least financially speaking.
Yeah. All right, I want to finally end on a fun one, which is which is the British Airways flight that took off from America with 2 American women on it, and it arrived at Heathrow after a fight erupted over a Donald Trump "Make America Great Again" cap, and a Heathrow source said, with the US presidential election so close, tensions are sky high. Anyway, and the brawl broke out apparently.
Younes, get yours.
Yeah, you need to get yours. That's it. We've got an example. That's not quite the right one, but yes, it is a variation. The brawl broke out as passengers waited to board a BA flight on Monday and held up departure for 2 hours. One of the women demanded the red baseball cap with the Republican US presidential nominee Trump's "Make America Great Again" slogan on it was taken off. Fucking entitled cow. And when the Trump supporter refused, punches were exchanged. Punches were exchanged in Terminal 5. Terminal 5 is the Queen's terminal. And the row continued on board the plane, bound for Austin, Texas, which, by the way, will probably vote Republican, so up yours, Kamala supporter, with the pair of them both in premium economy squaring up in the cabin. So they were throwing fists in the cabin.
Wow.
The captain had to call for assistance, and the cops escorted them both off the aircraft while they were continuing to exchange obscenities over a bloody cap, over a political disagreement. They weren't arrested, but they were quizzed by police, and both made claims of a fray against each other. And the flight, which was due to depart the airport at 12:10, actually eventually did so at 2:11 without the 2 women on board. Airline crew could not run the risk of a full-scale punch-up at 30,000 feet. And BA officials cannot recall a flight being delayed before due to a passenger's baseball cap. It was extraordinary. And I think that's fair enough to say, actually. But it does, on a serious note, it does go to show, one, I would be absolutely furious if I was on that flight, by the way, and it was held up for 2 hours because this woman can't stand the fact that someone disagrees with our politics. But secondly, I think it says something about the toxic nature of politics, where, you know, the left is supposed to be these hand in hand, kumbaya, equality, diversity, let's all get together. When actually, if you have diversity of political thought and opinion, well, you're an enemy, mate, and you better take that red cap off or I'm going to punch you square in the jaw. They're violent thugs.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's the whole irony of it. I'm just going to say this, Chloe, quickly. That's the whole irony of it. The left now are the fascists. The left now are the fascists because they are intolerant of everything that doesn't fall in line with their twisted woke agenda. Yeah, they are the fascists, and then they pretend that people that support Trump are the fascists, and they keep comparing them to the Nazis, but they are the Nazis. Go ahead, Chloe.
Chloe, I saw Alex Cox just wrote a comment a minute ago. He said, "Was Mike Amesbury involved?" And I think that's a really good example of exactly what we're talking about here. When the left don't like what you have to say, Rob, because they haven't got a good response, they use violence. I think it's perfect. Well done, Alex. So
for context, for those that might know, Mike Amesbury is the MP that stands accused of lamping his constituents several times and has been suspended from the Labour Parliamentary Party as a consequence. But Chloe, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, look, I see people all the time wearing, you know, Free Palestine badges and whatnot, right? And I don't agree with them. But do I go up to them and start a fight with them for wearing a badge with a political opinion on that I disagree with? No, I just say, all right, I'll leave them be. I don't agree with that person. I'm not going to start a fight, and it's their free speech. Fine. I mean, imagine, I'm thinking now, maybe the next flight I go on, I'll get a cap that says I stand with Israel on it and see what happens. I might be asking for trouble.
Well, you'll be all right on a flight to Tel Aviv.
But maybe not any other
probably
flight.
Struggle exactly, which is pretty damning. But you know, I think it says something about the left in general, because this is always the tactic of the left. You know, they decry fascism, but actually, I think the hallmark of a fascist is seeking censorship of political opponents, and that's what they do across the piece. So we might laugh at this, you know, that woman being hit for wearing a MAGA cap, but actually, it sums them up. The censorship of X, the attacks on Elon Musk as an innovator because he dares to back Donald Trump. All these things. The attack on the Washington Post because Jeff Bezos, formerly the head of Amazon, refused to endorse is the word I'm looking for, Kamala Harris, the hysterical hyena of politics. And all these other things, it smacks of actually the new fascism. They are the new fascists.
Yeah. Just one last word about this. I feel like things in politics, they morph in different directions. So we have like right-wing extremism, which was the Nazis like 85 years ago. But then now we have the left-wing. And the thing is, I'm actually liberal on some aspects. Like I'm center-right overall. I'm a center-right person, but I'm a libertarian, meaning I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of expression. No, but this is liberal values. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech is a liberal value. Okay. Freedom of expression is a liberal value. Being whoever you want to be is a liberal value. Freedom is a liberal. It comes from the word liberation. But these people are actually the opposite of liberal. They are left-wing authoritarian. Yeah. Meaning they are left-wing on their social positions and they try to control people to fall into that narrative. So I just think, you know, things morph around, and people that are pathological, you know, 85 years ago, they probably would have supported the Nazis, but now they probably, you know, support Kamala Harris and Keir Starmer and Free Palestine. So they're the same crowd. They just morphed into different colors. I feel like we're the ones that are actually relatively stable. I feel like the political spectrum is the one that moves around us. Exactly. But we actually stay where we are, you know?
Yeah. Right. Then finally, Steve asks this question. Before I let you all go, Steve says, a question to the panel. Should I put 100 quid on Trump to win? He's clear favourite on Sky Bet at the moment. And I think Steve's right that the betting markets are absolutely clear that they are favouring Trump right now. That's where the money
he's
is.
way ahead in the early voting as well, in swing states. Like in the early voting, it's not even close.
So Younes, you're a yes for Steve putting on his 100 quid.
Yeah, we'll put it, but you're not going to win much. You're going to probably get like 150 back. So
yeah, you should have put your bet down when he was losing in the polls, and you would have made some money.
Done it like
don't do it. Do not trust the Americans with their own election anymore. I think I think we're going to have a very horrendous come down next week when we find Kamala Harris has somehow miraculously won the election. I really hope I will eat my words on that one. I really do. But I no longer trust the process, unfortunately. I know I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist here.
Well, we've already found out about a load of voter fraud in Pennsylvania, 2,500 applications made, all with exactly the same handwriting. I mean, Younes, I can't remember if you found out. Have they now decided that they're going? I think they've decided that they're going to have to approve those applications, even though they've all got the same handwriting for some reason. I think they are being approved.
It's a video I made on the recent thing.
But I may be wrong. But one thing that's interesting,
and also like different signatures. Like there was two different signatures. Like on the first application, there's a guy with a name, but he's got a different signature. And then in another application, same guy, same name, but different signature.
Listen, I want to be a voice of optimism here because I want to end on a high note. And what I would say is, and I am happy to eat my words next week. I would say that actually, the polls underestimated Trump's vote last time. I think if they're doing it this time, hunky-dory, happy days. The swing states, the states that matter, Pennsylvania's looking quite promising. Of course, there are dodgy ballots and there are burnt ballots and there is a media bias stacked well and truly against him. But I think actually the signs are pretty promising, and ultimately, I have to tell myself this because the West needs him. Britain needs him. The world needs him. And that is a pretty tall order to make of anybody. But I think actually he's a necessary addition to the world's politics right now, because he's the only one that can save us from this madness and actually force this horrible Labour government to do stuff they don't want to do.
The thing is, one last word on this, Darren.
Don't be pessimistic. That was my happy note.
Yes, no, don't be pessimistic. You have to be optimistic, because Donald Trump was like 18 points behind in 2016 and he won. In 2020, he was like 7 or 8 points behind and he lost. But
and
this
I would
time,
say
he's
Kamala
winning in
is
the
worse
polls.
than Hillary.
He's winning in the polls this time. He has never ever polled this strongly at this point of the election ever. So we should be optimistic that he will win, and I think he will actually win a lot bigger than people think. I feel like he's going to win out either 6 or 7 out of the 7 swing states, and he's going to get big votes in like states like New York. He's not going to win it, but you might
really
have like
hope
40,
you're right,
45%. No, I really think I think really he's going to get like, okay, I'm going to make a bet. He's going to get over 300 electoral votes easily. I'll bet £100 right now. He's going to get over 300 electoral votes. Who wants to bet? Does anyone want to bet against me?
I'm going to have a bet that she beats him by a very narrow margin. Let's do that, because I don't believe that they're going to let him win.
Do you want to do £100?
Let's go over it.
Well, this is going to be
I'll
like,
say
here's
she
Morgan and Rich's team that making a bet.
Next week's podcast is actually... No, it's actually on the day of the election, so it'll have to be.
So we might not know. We might not know. Yeah. We might. You never know.
I'll hold you to it, Alex.
Yeah.
Right. Sounds good. I like that.
Cool.
I like that. Let's do that.
Cool.
I just want to be really clear. I would love Trump to win. I do not want Kamala to win, but I don't trust the American process. Just to be very clear.
What do you mean? You don't care about what has been and what could have been?
We'll be unburdened by what has been after the election when Kamala wins.
We'll fall out of the coconut tree.
Oh, God.
We're gonna win, guys. We're gonna beat Kamala. She's going to go. Okay, we're not having Kamala in our country. All right.
If anyone hasn't watched it, go watch the Joe Rogan podcast with Trump because
yes, I've been enjoying it. I'm halfway through actually. I've been enjoying it immensely.
Podcast.
All right, guys, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for joining me, Younes, Alex, and Chloe. Give the nation a wave, and I'll see you all next week. And hopefully, things will be looking a little bit cheerier. Who knows? We'll see what those exit polls say.
Yeah.
Right. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
That was a quick exit, Chloe.